Welcome to the Quintessential Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Quinn Shalloway. In today's episode, I am interviewing an investor from the Northeast, Jake Burnhands. Cold hands, burn hands. So Jake, tell us a little bit about what you do all the way up there, and or how do you get started, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, so I'm actually living in St. Petersburg, Florida, right now. No, I'm from New Hampshire. I haven't updated on there yet, so that's my fault. Recently moved down here a couple months ago, but we buy properties. We predominantly run a wholesale company. We wholesale for most of our business. Something that my partner and I started back in college. We've been doing it for about 2-3 years now. So we focus on wholesaling. For anyone that doesn't know what it is, I like to think of it as the acquisition side for fix and flippers, right? People who fix and flip properties like Quinn, right? You don't want to be out there cold calling and doing all this stuff to get the deal, right? You just want the deal. So that's where we come into play. We're the first leg of the transaction. So I run a direct to seller business that focuses on the acquisition of off-market real estate deals. That's what I tell people. So we'll reach out to the seller. They may not even have their property listed, right, at all. And we're reaching out, hey, would you ever consider an offer? And if they do, into our pipeline, our sales pipeline, then the end result of that is a signed purchase and sale agreement, right? So let's say that we get that purchase and sale for $100,000. Maybe the property is worth $250,000, completely fixed up, but the property might need a ton of work. We might assign that purchase and sale to a fix and flipper for, say, $115,000, and then we would just make a spread there. So it's important to understand your numbers, know what you're doing, so you can get things at the right price. But that's essentially the gist of wholesaling.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. We've never had a wholesaler on the podcast, and I think it's this really unique thing where you see some of these bigger investment pages talking about, like bigger pockets, talking about wholesalers, whether they're good or not, and they rip off these poor old ladies that they're being taken advantage of or whatever. What is kind of the value that you think that not the end user but the beginning user basically? Where's the value there?
So for the seller, we're pretty much going after people who are in some sort of distressed situation, right? So these are people that are willing to trade price for speed and convenience. And I like to use the analogy, you're getting a bottle of water, right? You pull over at the gas station, you pay $3.50 for a bottle of water for the speed and convenience of that water. You know dang well you could go to the grocery store and get a package of 20 waters, and that cost of that water only be 20 cents, right? Yep. But you choose this route for the speed and convenience, right? And there's a lot of other value we provide. And I think the biggest misconception with wholesaling is people think that price is the most important thing to people, which it is not, right? It's a very small percentage of people, maybe out of 100 people selling their house, only 5 to 7 people we're doing deals with. So it's a very small percentage, right? Which is why it's important to have a sales process. Make sure you're identifying the right types of people, right? But at the end of the day, we're looking for problems, people with problems. That's sales, right? You're solving a problem. So it's people who, like I said, are willing to trade price for speed and convenience. And there's other things we're providing. So the house is a disaster. We're helping them do that. We're helping them move. We're doing this white glove service, right? Helping them out with other things so that our price is essentially worth it, right? Okay. And they know every time, I know I can get more money for this, right? But no, I'd rather just do the deal with you because I just want to be done with it, Yeah. So those are the types of people.
Okay. And opposed to, basically you're saying we're just concierge to finding you a flipper. That's kind of what it is.
Yeah, well, I'm saying a white glove service.
Yeah, explain the white glove service.
So the white glove service is essentially the customer service aspect with the seller, right? So we're not just coming and say, hey, here's our offer. We're saying we're willing to help you out with everything else that's going on, right? Is the property in complete disrepair? Do you have a ton of things? Like we had a seller in Manchester, New Hampshire. He was moving to Texas. We paid for all of his moving costs, hired a crew to come in, move his stuff out, put it in the truck, get it down to Texas, found him an apartment in Texas, right? So it's going above and beyond. It's not just, hey, here's our offer, right? It's like, no, actually care about the person, see what you can do to help them out, get them to where they need to go, right? At the end of the day, it has to be what we call a win-win-win, right? It's got to be a win for the seller, a win for us, and a win for the end buyer, right? So if everyone is not happy here, then it's not a sustainable business.
Yeah. Well, I like that point that you just made. It kind of sets you apart a little bit because like you said, it's about money, and sometimes people don't have access to their money until they sell the home. So if you're able to offer them something like, hey, we'll get you situated here so we can then sell the property, but we have the funds to do this because we have agreed upon price, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's That's a great marketing, technique, because there are probably plenty of people just dialing phones saying, "Hey, I'll give you X amount of dollars for this price. I mean, for this property," and just kind of take it from there. And then, because we always say real estate is a pirate ship. Whether it's real estate agents, it only takes 80 hours to get your license. I mean, and then there are people like you who's just like basically you just pay for the property. Public information or whatever, and you get a couple phone numbers, you just start calling it up. So it's always good whenever I talk to different people. It's like, you never know who you're going to get on the phone who is in this industry. So it's good to have, people running decent businesses.
Well, exactly. And running it like a business, not a hobby. And that's honestly the most difficult part of this industry, wholesaling, is there's no barrier to entry.
Yeah.
You have people preaching to the high heavens, whatever they're preaching on social media. That's the easiest business ever. So people are just locking up contracts, don't even know what they're doing. This is the bad part of wholesaling, right? People who, and maybe like regulation is coming for wholesaling, you hear, right? Maybe that's somewhat a good thing, right? To have some sort of entry and standards, because we have good standards, but we choose that, right? Mm-hmm. Not everyone has the morals essentially to do that. But the bad side is people will just be locking people up at way too high of a price. Say the price of the property is worth $250. Yeah. They're just locking up at $225. They have no idea what they're doing. That family moves out, and then the wholesaler's like, well, couldn't find a buyer, obviously, because you don't even know what you're doing.
Yeah.
So that's why I like to be loud about what I'm doing. This is how you do it. But I always preach the best way to get started, if you don't know, is don't go do it on your own. Go join a community, for one. And then for two, squad up with someone, right? Try to get your hands on a transaction in one form or another. Maybe it's just generating leads, right? Calling, putting hot leads onto someone's plate who runs a real business and can actually close it and take care of that lead. And that way you can learn the business the right way, right? Or maybe you start as an acquisition manager for someone. But I think squatting up is the best way to get started, because there's so many different things to a deal. And I think a reason why people don't get started or have trouble getting started is they don't know all the steps. Well, it's like, you don't need to know all the steps. A to Z is a lot, right? Where do I find the list? Calling the seller. Okay, they do want to sell. Now what do I say? What process do I take them through? They want to sign it. What contract do I send, right? Okay, I have the deal. Now what do I do? How do I sell it to a buyer? Like, how does the title company work? All these things. So that's why I think it's a lot to comprehend. So I think it just kind of squatting up and taking experience from other people is the best thing to do.
Absolutely. So talk to me about how you get started in this industry. Do we need capital? Obviously you're saying, hey, you got to squat up, do that. So if I want it, do I have to have skin in the game, or can I do it without skin in the game? And number two, where do I get these lists? Like, how do I do that? And then basically, how do I go about reaching out to them? What type of marketing is going on there?
Yeah. So you can start for free, but it's like anything, right? It's going to take a lot longer. I'll tell you that.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can start for free. So the classic start for free method is just like in real estate investing, they preach on bigger pockets, driving for dollars, right? So if you truly want to start for free and you want to call on your own, I try to find the most distressed properties. That's going to be the highest chance that you'll actually find a deal, because it is a numbers game. But say you drive around your neighborhood and you get 200 really distressed properties, right? Roof looks bad, the siding's falling off, mailbox is full, grass is high, things like that. Put those on a Google spreadsheet, right? With all the property addresses. And if you want to do it for free, you could use truepeoplesearch.com, and you could manually enter those addresses and put the numbers in. Or you could pay 15 cents a record and use batch skip tracing, significantly better data. And you'd only have to spend $30 for 200 leads at 15 cents a pop.
Yeah.
$30. So that's just a no-brainer for me, because the data is so much more accurate. It's tough enough calling these sellers. Last thing you need is wrong number, wrong owner, blah, blah, blah. It's just going to discourage you. So I'd say that'd be the best way to get started. Start making dials. And then once you get a seller on the line, the intro says, hey, Quinn, this is Jake. How you doing? Yeah, I was calling about your property on 123 Main Street. Just wanted to see if you'd ever consider an offer on that property. Yeah. Right? Would you be open to it? They say yes. To keep things basic, there's 4 basic things you need, what we call the pre-qualifying pillars, right, of every single home. And this is the condition of the property, their timeline to sell, their motivation, their reason for selling, and their price, right? If you can get the condition, understand that needs some work, their timeline is now, motivation is strong, right, where they're probably willing to trade price for speed and convenience, and they're in that ballpark range. That makes sense for you. If you can get that information, you can either make the offer yourself, or you can bring that to someone who knows how to talk to sellers who can close it. And that would be a hot lead. That's how you could more or less get started for $60.
Yeah, man, it's not a lot, but I would imagine
No.
there's a lot of the cost really is in the repetition of all these cold calls. That is, I mean,
Yes.
you're probably on like an auto dialer, just taking you to the next one, boom, boom, crafting,
Mm-hmm.
your skill set, getting better and better. I mean, on a standard day, like if you're time blocking or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
what's kind of like your day look like to try to get a lead? And like how much does it take? Like what's the percentage kind of? I mean, I'm sure there are
Mm-hmm.
metrics that you use.
Yeah. So I'm just doing closing now. We have 3 cold callers and a lead follow-up manager, so I can get into the acquisition
Yeah.
side of it. But more or less, and I'll steal this from Brett Daniels, if ever anyone knows him. He says this is the perfect cold calling day, which I agree with when you're getting started. 9 to 12, you're on the dialer, right? Ideally, you got to just get a triple line dialer if you're going to cold call yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's such a numbers game. Get a triple line dialer. You can use batch dialer. It'll be a couple $100 a month. But I think with all this, if you're trying to do a new business venture, you should set aside like 6 months of expenses, full expenses to go in on this, right? Because you can't just do it for 3 weeks and say it doesn't work, right? You got to put a significant amount of time to be consistent enough.
Yeah.
So 9 to 12 cold call, right? Take a 15, 20-minute lunch. You don't need an hour lunch, right? Lead follow-up from 1 to 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go on appointments, or we're all virtual. I don't go to houses, but 2 to 5, you can go on appointments or make offers, right? So 9 to 12, you're cold calling. What is lead follow? Well, when you're doing outbound prospecting, the nature of it, you're going to reach people at all sorts of timelines, right? Yeah, I'm looking to sell in 8 months, in 6 months, in 4 months, right? So they're not ready. That's that timeline piece. You're going to have to follow up until they are ready. And that's when you want to give them your offer, right?
Mm-hmm.
So lead follow-up is a whole component, because on the acquisition side as a whole, from a business perspective, you have lead gen, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lead gen is calling a massive list. Anyone who raises their hand says, I want to sell my property and I have a reason to sell it. That's not what's your offer. It's not a real reason. Gets pushed to the CRM, right? Our lead manager is then going to go qualify all those leads. So say we get 10 to 12 new leads a day. People said, yeah, I want to sell. Lead manager is going to go in, make sure there's a real motivation, a real reason for them selling, and kind of qualify where their timeline is. If they're within 60 days of selling, they're going to kick it up to the closers, the acquisition people, acquisition reps. And acquisitions is going to take them through our sales process to see if we're a good fit for them, right? And ultimately, if we are, get the purchase and sale. Also, another component is at that sales level, the acquisitions level, maybe they just need to be referred to a realtor, right? If it's a nice property, why don't you just list the property?
Yeah.
Well, I've been thinking about it. Great. Here's our realtor in Orlando. Mm-hmm. Have him reach out to him, see what's going on there. If you don't want to do that, come back to me, right?
Yeah.
So it's kind of diagnosing what's best for him. Well, why don't you just keep it and rent it? Well, I'm sick of being a landlord. I could do it, but I'm just done with it. Well, you could get property management. Yeah, but then you got to manage the property managers. Okay, got it. Totally get it. So asking those questions from a sales perspective of why they don't go different routes, because then it kind of pins them back to you. So you've asked them all the questions. We call it going for no. You've asked all the questions. Mm-hmm. You're the only one left. So it makes sense kind of, right? And then you take them down the line.
Yeah, absolutely. You give them all the options. And then once they say no, It's like, well, it kind of sounds like you'd like to do this. And you can kind of go from there. I love that. I mean, we did a flip last year where basically we kind of said to them, it's like, look, you could do the work and, flip this property if you'd like. And it's like, no, I don't really want to do that. And I said, okay, well, one of the things that we like to do is sometimes we'll come in and we can provide capital. We can provide the contractors. All we need is an equitable interest. And, probably 3 months we can we'll split profits, but you can actually make some money. He just goes, no, I literally just want to sell it. I just want the money in 10 days and get out. And it's just like, okay. And that's like one of those situations you're talking about where they don't necessarily want all the money. They just need it to get out. And just identifying that pain point, whether it's money or your time, that's probably the most important part of that call.
It's just, it's solving problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why it's important to understand, like, we're providing other value besides price, right? Because what is money, right? It's an exchange of value. I wash your car, you give me $20. You think that's $20 worth of value. The seller is essentially saying, hey, I'm willing to sell it at this discount if you can do X, Y, and Z for me, right? It's that X, Y, and Z is valuable enough for me to give it to you at this price, right? You don't just get something for nothing, which is, I think, what people think. Yeah. Oh, you're just getting something for nothing. You're getting it 60 cents on the dollar for nothing, but it's not for nothing, right? So I think it's important to understand the XYZ, which is the problems of the seller that you're solving.
Now, how long have you been doing this?
So we started in college, doing it part-time. So we did it part-time for about 2 years. And this is another classic story, just doing everything and thinking that you can do everything and then realizing, well, no, I can't do everything. I got to focus on one thing. So we were realtors, we were wholesaling, we were buying multifamily. We're going to do it all. No, we didn't do it all. So for the past 14 months, we've been full-time in this business. Just to share some numbers, I like to be transparent about kind of what we've been done. So this year we did, we just got our numbers back. I think we did like 289 in gross revenue. I think we have another 60,000 in locked in with buyers projected profit so far. So put us up around 350 for the year. It's like our first year, right? And it's crazy. We probably did 20 to 25 deals, right?
Wow.
So like two deals a month on average. But if you look back, it's like, you'd be surprised what you could do in a year of just consistent, focused effort, no distractions. Because dude, I was calling at the beginning. January, I was freaking cold calling. We had no team, right? We had no idea. Isaiah, my business partner, and I went to a meetup in January. We're like, man, we should probably get like a VA or something. Like I probably shouldn't be cold calling. There's no way we're going to make it anywhere. And so we went and got our first cold caller, and like, it's just, I don't know. It's really like hockey stick growth. It's like, it's absolutely insane.
So all right. That is a great question, because I feel like you see it in all parts of business, but when people get started, what is the level where you said, I'm done doing this part, I'm willing to pay for it? What threshold did you get to where you said enough is enough, I'm willing to pay the money? Like, what was that pain point for you? Because I even had that myself. Like I'm a solo agent, and, I help a lot of people, and I always think like, I could do an admin, or I could get a buyer's agent or something like that. I still haven't quite done it. I've been basically thinking about it the last like 2 years, and I've just kind of held back my money, and not done it. But what on your end, how's that work?
Yeah, it's such a mindset thing though. It's like almost a scarcity mindset. You don't want to pay.
Sure.
And we're still trying to rework our brain, because our goal next year is $1 million, right? In 2024 in gross revenue. So we're like, but we got to spend money to get there. Like we can't spend $10,000 a month and make $1 million a year. We have to be spending like 30K a month.
Yeah.
So we're like, what the heck? Like we got to start marketing for like PPC and these other things, right? Pay-per-click, Google ads. So it's a complete mindset shift, and that's just a higher level. But even at the base level, well, I don't really want to pay for a cold call. Money's tight. I don't want to do it.
Yep.
But you have to understand that it's really just a numbers game. I mean, as wholesalers, we're going after that 5% of the market, right? So are you going to sit there and just cold call all day people who aren't even interested in selling? Like, I'd rather put someone there, right? And you can get a VA $5-6 an hour, do whatever you need to do to have that very basic level conversation, right? It's calling people, hey, would you ever think about selling it? Great. And then push it over, right? And then you're at least a level up, right? And then you're just filtering through all those people who said I'm interested versus just people who you've never even spoken to. So I think the threshold for me was just following people, right? Understanding how their businesses work. And we're just copying people's businesses, right? Like we follow certain people and we're like, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. So we see all these people have teams, and we're like, we're just never going to get there. We'll never make it anywhere if I'm just cold calling. So it just got to a point where it's like, do we actually want to do this business? Do we want to make it work? Well, we got to start hiring some people, right? Yeah. And you don't hire everyone at once, but you get one person, and you train them. And and one quick thing on that with hiring, it's people are, I think finding good talent is one of the hardest things to do, right? Is finding good talent and training good talent, right? Ideally, the less training, the better, but I kind of underestimated how much work was involved in like training people, well, like vastly underestimated it.
Yeah. And plus they're not as, how do you structure them as far as how do they get paid? But number two, it's like, it's not their business, it's your business. And that's the hardest part, because you're going to care more probably. And so training, finding the best talent, and just paying them well, don't skimp on it, because they're the ones doing like the grunt work, But what's like the incentive structure for those people who are just like dialing,
Yeah. So dialing, they get an hourly rate, and then they get commission for every deal as well.
Oh, sweet.
So every deal of theirs that gets closed is commission based as well. And same thing for the lead manager. And then once we looking to hire one acquisition rep in the first quarter of next year, and then our second one in the second quarter, but you can switch it. Ideally, it's like 100% commission, because that's better for us, right? Incentives are aligned. We can pay you more money if you go 100% commission, right? So there's definitely incentives. And I think a big part of that is having a mission statement, right? And having these values that your team can get behind, understand it. They're not just cold calling, right? They need to see how the lead that they bring in goes through the lead manager. The lead manager is setting the appointment, right? Recognize them in the Slack channel. Hey, Hannah got this lead in, set for acquisitions. I get it under contract. Hey, Hannah brought this in. Alex teed it up for me, just locked it up. There's a ton of competition on it. Like we just had a deal this morning where that was the case. And having them feel recognized, right? And then also when it does get to the finish line, getting them money. So
yeah, absolutely. Plus them seeing that like you guys perform. It's like all I gotta do is get this fish in the boat or on the line, and it's like I know Jake is gonna close this. Like he's a killer, you know. And I'm sure that's like, oh, I did it. I did my job, and now I know, you know. Hopefully, I'm gonna get paid, and that's a really cool.
Yep. Exactly.
Now, how do you keep that? So you said Slack. How do you keep that culture going? You know, because your guys, you're all virtual. Like, do you meetups or things like that? Like, how do you kind of keep it going? Because sales is like rah rah. I mean, you got to keep people like motivated. You know, it's like
it is. It's a good question. So we have daily huddles every day. So that'll be my touch point for them in the beginning. But yeah, it's just communication through Slack, and I think it's a little different with cold calling and lead follow up. It's not as high of a skill level required as closing.
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. But I know people we follow have very successful businesses. They have virtual closers as well. So I need to dig into more of that. How do you create that culture? That's a very good question.
Yeah. Especially
in that sales role. I mean, you got to be there coaching them, right? That's a big position to hire out. But yeah, I'd say that the daily meetings, the communication in Slack is the biggest way to try to foster that culture.
Yeah. No, I kind of look at this and I go, okay, so we started out dialing, then we slowly built the team. Then you've got you're a closer now. Is the goal basically to slowly kind of hire out these cogs so you can kind of like step above and just kind of like, okay, this is where we're diverting money for marketing to get these deals and stuff like that, like purely measurement and analytical side strategy for the company?
Yeah, Alex Hormozy calls it nose in, hands out. That's where I want to be. Nose in, hands out, about 5 hours a week. That's the ultimate goal. So yeah, by the end of 2025 to have the whole thing scaled. So we're out, right? And we're looking at this business as a cash flowing asset. That's the way we're looking at it. So if we can systematize the whole thing, it'll be a cash flowing asset. And then we're going to go back into multifamily. That's always been our goal. We're like, okay, let's build a business first, get a ton of cash flow, and then we'll go buy a bunch of real estate with that cash flow.
Yeah, I love that. Using it as just a vehicle. Now, the idea, so you've got this cash flow, you view it as an asset. Do you see wholesalers sell their book of business or their systems to another wholesaler? Would that be an exit strategy?
Yeah, it's interesting because that is a concept you should have as a business owner, is like always building it with the intention of selling it. It's an interesting perspective though. Do you want to sell it or not, right? Because what's the purpose of us building it right now? So if we sell it, yeah, we could get a big windfall of money, but we're gonna have to go find something else to equal that cash flow, you know? Yeah. So it might just make more sense for us to hold it, you know, and have it systematized.
If it's running appropriately, why not? And then if it's just stacking cash, I mean, so 2025, that's kind of when you're gonna say, okay, we've got the systems in place and the money that is being, reinvested back into the business. I mean, at some point though, you're going to be putting money in, but then you got to start pulling money out to go back to what you're saying is buying multis, I would imagine, right?
Yeah. So I think that would be more like whatever our personal cut is, like Isaiah and I's personal cut, like some of that would go to living expenses, whatever's left over. That's like our investing money that we're going to go find deals with.
Gotcha.
But it's a whole other thing. We haven't really technically thought that far. So that's a good question, honestly. If we will just allocate a percentage of the profits. So say we take 20% profits that we split from the business, Isaiah and I, maybe 10% of it, we both decide, hey, let's just 10%, boom, to starting the other business, and we'll just live on the other 10, Yeah. It's a good question.
How do you have this structured, right? So I'm hearing so we've got the wholesaling, and then we want to go back into multis. Do you guys have an LLC set up? Do you have is it inside another company? Like, how is your business structured to keep you basically not liable?
Yeah. So we have So I have my own holding company. Isaiah has his own holding company.
Okay. So it's
and
not a
those
partnership.
it's not a partnership.
Okay.
And those two holding companies own 50% of all of our income producing LLCs. So like we have an LLC for wholesaling.
Mm-hmm.
His holding company owns 50%. I own 50%, right? The reason we did that is we could have done a whole holding company together, but we love working together. We're a great fit, but there could be certain ventures that maybe he wants to do on his own. I want to do on my own. We don't want to be married there, right? So we have the autonomy to do our own thing if we want. But if it makes sense for us to go together on another business venture after this, we have the ability to do so.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, it basically doesn't create any internal strife between the founders.
Nope.
And because there are some times where you're going to be really hype about this one venture and he's going to be like, I'm good, man. We're making great money here. I want to put money back into this. And, it's like, cool. That's great.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think that's the best way to go about it. And it's like, but some people will do a holding company together and I get it, but like, why though? If you can just have separate ones and still do everything the same, but have the additional ability to do your own thing, it's just a no-brainer. Like, why would you want to be tied in with the whole thing? I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it gets back to just, trying to do too many things with, your partner or what yourself, like you said, like started out, got into real estate, as an agent, did flipping, got into wholesaling, did all these things. I mean, that's all well and good, but then you're running around with your head cut off with no real system involved, and now you've kind of like honed it in. And I feel like that's like where you maximize your profits and all your time.
Yeah, 100% is the systems. And Isaiah, we just did our EOS. So the book Traction by Gino Wickman, it's like has the EOS, the entrepreneur operating system.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much from what I can tell, almost everyone when they have a business that they're kind of scaling up, right? So it's pretty much an operating system for entrepreneurs to implement in their business to give it structure, give them goals, vision, have them be able to actually scale it up. So we just did that session last week and it was great, get all those dopamine hits when you're like talking about your goals and stuff and getting all rah. But it's great. But the other side of that is like, man, the pressure is on. Because Isaiah told me the other day, he's like, yeah, because there's a lag, right? We get things under contract in December. Well, that's January. That's Q1.
Yep.
If we need to do 83,000 a month, like you better be making offers every day.
Yeah.
Like, so it's just this level of accountability. Like, dang, this is real. Okay. We got to do this. Like I have to make sure I'm hitting all my things as a closer every day.
Yeah.
Cause I'm doing two things, right? Well, we both are. He does dispositions, which is selling the deal to the investor, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I got to make sure that I'm working in the business, closing deals, bringing in revenue, while on top of that, also building the team, right? Because that's the ultimate goal. So it's this balance of be in the business, be in the closer seat, close the deals so that everything functions while also building the systems and the business around it, right?
Yeah.
So you kind of got to balance those things.
My point that I was thinking about was, with your business, you got to stay on it and you're like, there's a lot of pressure. And I relate it to myself with this, sales funnel. It's like the only person you have to basically blame is yourself. I see so many people in my industry, blaming the market, blaming this, that, or the other thing, or their personal life on why. And I always say, it's like, look, the only person I'm mad at is 6 months to go Quinn. That ultimately is he is the culprit of this situation. It's like, I can never get mad at the production this December. It's no one's fault but mine. And I'm sure that's just something you're dealing with every day. I mean, you've got your callers, but at the end of the day, you're the one driving the ship.
Mm-hmm. I think it goes back to extreme ownership, right? Like Jocko Willink talks about it, his book. But it's like, for example, you're driving down the highway, you're following kind of close to a car, he slams on the brakes, you hit him, right? Well, technically, yes, it's his fault. He shouldn't just be slamming on the brakes, but if you look at it in the perspective of like, what could I have done differently? Maybe if I wasn't following him as closely, right? Maybe if I was just way further back than I need to be. Maybe I thought I was plenty behind him, right? Yeah. But he slams on his brakes, I hit him. Well, if I was 200 feet further behind him, I wouldn't have hit him, right? Mm-hmm. Versus just saying, oh, screw this guy, he slammed on his brakes, right? So that's kind of the perspective of extreme ownership. You take extreme ownership, you put the control in your hands versus putting the control in someone else's hands. When you're playing the victim, there's nothing you could do to change the situation. Yeah. Because it's someone else is in control. But when you say it was my fault for X, Y, or Z reason, you know what you could do differently next time to prevent that. Yeah. So I think, not playing the victim is absolutely huge. It's just getting up and doing the work every day. I mean, I was thinking this morning, I was like, this business is just showing up.
Mm-hmm.
You could show up every day, and it's for a lot of things in life too, like the gym. Like I did not want to go to the gym this morning, but I just kind of went. It was legs, and legs suck, but I just did like 3 sets, right? Just some things. But I was like, at least I went to the gym, did a few sets. I'm keeping that momentum up, and my confidence is still up. So okay, I still went to the gym and did the thing.
Yep.
So I think on those days when you really don't want to do it, it's so vital, whether it's making calls or for being a realtor or being a wholesaler or whatever it is that's difficult. Just get a few reps in for the day to keep that momentum going. And a lot of times, once you start doing some of the reps, you're just going to end up doing more, right? Like I might go to the gym and say, yeah, I'll do 2 sets of whatever, but then I'm already there and I'm like, well, I'm actually feeling pretty good. Then you end up doing 3, 4, 5 anyways, right? Same thing with calls. Let me just do 1 or 2 calls. Well, you never do 1 or 2. Let me just do like 10 more, and you end up just doing a lot.
Yeah. Oh, that's great advice.
Yeah, because there's this thing called Stephen Pressfield talks about it in his book, The Art of War, which is a really good book, but he calls about this force resistance because he's a writer, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about this force of resistance. It's like the hardest part about being a writer is not writing. It's sitting down to write. That's the hardest part every single day. You don't want to actually sit down and start. Once you start, it's all the resistance goes away. Same thing with my calls, right? A lot of times I don't want to call in the morning. I just don't want to do it. It's the last thing I want to do. I don't want to call sellers and do the thing. But once I get that first call out of the way, it's like, oh, I feel great, right? Then you're in the mood and then you're doing it. But I think a lot of people don't get past that resistance because sometimes the resistance is so strong. It's just like everything is stacking against you. You do not want to do that activity or that task. But once you do it, the weight's kind of lifted off your shoulders and you can move forward and you start chugging.
Yeah. That's great advice. I mean, there are plenty of times where I'm just like, I do not want to call these, random people in my CRM to try to make, make a contact or something like that. Yeah. But then sometimes it's like, you know what, I'm going to call some people I know and just kind of get the ball rolling and then
100%.
Really get into it. But you always feel so much better, like you said. And then, I mean, sales is a momentum game. If you start getting some good ones, like, all right. You walk out of a closing, it's like, let's call the next 5 guys, like on the way home, just do that. I mean, there's a bunch of different ways to get it going. So let's kind of shift to, obviously, real estate itself from the retail side, people that I help buy and sell with. It's definitely shifting just with the power of money, being more, I mean, the buying power of money going up, and we are seeing slow. I wouldn't really call, like, I don't really believe we're going for any type of crash or anything along those lines. But there's less buyers out there right now, and we'll see what happens this coming year. They're talking about dropping, the federal funds rate, which will then, impact our industry. The last 24 months, we've had some pretty, there've been some greedy sellers, right? And in your 5% of this entire market, what have you seen in the last 6 to 8 months, the last 2 quarters, at just their mentality? Like, what do these people know about the market? And, is it anything like what I'm dealing with, or is it just completely different niche where, they just have this problem and you're giving them a solution?
I think there's 2 parts to it, because there's one part where the person is in pretty serious situation that they don't really care about the price and they're just trying to sell it, right?
Yeah.
But then there's deals that we do where they have pain, but it's not like a real distress thing, but we still kind of work out a number that makes sense. We can still find a number.
Yeah.
With the latter group, you will see them be like, well, I know the market's going up. A lot of them. Well, the market around here is, everyone thinks their house is in the best place ever.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Well, the market around here, these houses are going, this is one of the most highly sought after areas. They got a McDonald's going in right down the street.
I can see the arch. That my first apartment was, I'd lay my head down and I could see the arch. And I'm like, gosh.
Literally. But funny enough, though, the last, I'd say that was the sentiment for a long time. Because I got into this business right at COVID. So I've never seen anything but absolute just bananas real estate market. But over the past month, I would say month and a half, I have heard a handful of sellers be like, yeah, well, I know the market's changing. I've seen it. I've heard them say that.
Yeah.
I've seen properties sell for less. So I think sellers are starting to realize, because there's essentially a lag, right? Because sellers aren't most of them aren't tracking Jerome Powell and understanding that the Feds
No.
are raising the rates, right? And how it's going to affect everything. There's a massive lag with, okay, the central bank makes decisions, right? And then the realtors are going to understand, okay, well, things aren't really going to be selling for much because of X, Y, or Z reason. They're trying to convey that to the seller. And then there's another level. The sellers really aren't going to believe it until they see things start to price drop, right? They in their neighborhood start to price drop. Things are selling for less. Then they realize, okay, I can't ask for this number, which is way up here, right? I got to be down in reality.
No, that's good. I mean, I just think that's a really good point too. There are not a lot of people that follow this stuff. You know, they kind of put their head in the sand, and then when the time comes, they kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, then they'll ask their aunt and their uncle, they'll give them opinion of the price. And then that, you know, makes it all sticky for you and I, you know, when the time comes. But, you know, I think, and that's kind of why I do this podcast, is because the idea is just educating people, educating buyers, sellers, investors to just understand. Like we did a market update last month, and, you know, it's neither here nor there. This is just the temperature of the market right now. This is not trying to convince you to do anything, but you need to understand where we're at. And, you know, people need to take the time rather than reading just like the headline of, you know, housing market's going to crash or it's coming back.
I think that's an important thing, educating too. It's tough for realtors, I can imagine, because sellers do not like it when you tell them their house is not worth what they think it is.
Oh, you got to come loaded with ammunition. You got to just one, it's confidence, it's knowing your market, and just like you tell them how it is. And, you know, you lose listings like that. That's okay. I mean, I've lost listings where I go in with a price. I tell them I've got a great, you know, pricing pond structure of like, hey, this is what I think we can do. This is, you know, everything. And I end up losing because and I always say, I'm like, you know, another guy might tell you another price, but that's to get the listing, and then they'll get you back down to my price. And
that's the hardest thing.
It's like, dude, you got the listing by just giving them their number, and that does them a disservice. And, you know, it's super frustrating, but, you know, then you drive by it every day and you're like, this guy's a freaking idiot. But
yeah, I know. Honestly, it's like classic overpromise, underdeliver. You know, when you want to underpromise, overdeliver. But it's the same thing with us on the sales side, right? You might have someone lock them up super high. Like, especially I was talking to a seller this morning. She had an offer from Open Door, right? Which is like a big buying company. I'm like, all right, they're going to give you the most money. I'm just going to let you know, like, just be aware. They're going to come in. This is a 1,000% a strategy. They're going to give you your number. They're going to come in and say X, Y, and Z, take you all the way to the finish line. 2 days before closing. Yep. You know, we're going to need $15K off this thing, you know, roof, other things we didn't realize. And they do that. And they don't care. They're just heartless.
Yeah.
They don't care. They're a massive corporation. So there's pros and cons to that. Cause okay, massive corporation, they're legit, right? They're going to close, but that's not always the case. Actually, but a lot of times they have no emotion. So they can just back out sometimes. Like they might even put $5,000 earnest money down.
Yeah, exactly.
2 days before,
that's
boom,
little
back
money.
Out. They don't even care.
Yeah, and it's not ethical, but what they can do is like, we're going to walk like right now. And like, we have a house lined up. It's like, take it or leave it. We'll leave the 5,000, but you have fall out escrow for the other house. I mean, there are some really dirty things you can do in this industry.
Ruthless.
And and you're putting people's like families, livelihoods just in jeopardy. And I mean, if you, the day of, they say we need $20,000 to make this deal go. And you're just like, honey, we're closing on the next house, you know, using the proceeds of this.
Yeah.
Like, this was 30 days, you know, now we're going to have to list the property, you know, appropriately. If we drop out, it's like, is it really worth it? But that's pretty crazy. Let's kind of end on this, you know, so you're talking with a lot of different types of, you know, distressed sellers, buyers, and, where do you see the market kind of heading? You're kind of nationwide, right? Like you're calling all around. So you're seeing the different markets, where they're hot, where they're cold. You know, what do you think is going to happen in the next 12 months here?
Yeah, obviously no one holds a crystal ball. Nope. Classic disclaimer there. But so we're mainly in New England and Florida right now. Okay. Our main markets, which I think are two very different markets, right? Florida's more the Sun Belt. A lot of population growth there. New England, New Hampshire, Maine, Mass. I mean, people are exiting those locations. So definitely different. I think it's going to be really interesting in the spring of next year. kind of like that March to June timeframe, because like I had mentioned earlier, for the first time ever in the past 3 years, this last month, I've started to hear sellers say, yeah, well, I'm seeing things change, right? Seeing prices come down. I talked to my friends who are realtors. Yeah, things just kind of turned really quick. That's what they're telling me. Yeah, like a month and a half ago, I was talking to one of my contacts in Hampshire, and she's like, yeah, things have just changed really quick, and listings are hard to get right now, right? So I'm curious. To me, it seems like that lag from central bank making a decision to realtors conveying the information, sellers understanding it. Sellers are just starting to understand it. So I'm thinking that things will stay stagnant and even decrease a little bit in price point over the next 6 to 8 months is what I'm thinking. I think we're really going to feel the recession in next year.
Yeah.
Not to be a doomsday predictor,
No,
but
it's not, you're not the only person to feel that way where it's going to stagnate. They say,
what do you think?
So it's really hard because on one hand, right, you have sellers who have these great rates. So they really don't want to sell. They feel like they can't sell because money's so cheap. Maybe they hold on to it. They're saving for another property that they can buy, and then they can hold on to that one. That's a real conversation with a lot of people I have. And I try to always say, like, if you can hold on to it, you really should, because real estate's an asset, especially when you can, use it with tax purposes and whatnot. But they say, like, when interest rates go up, that creates urgency for people to buy because they don't want their money to be worth less, right? So if, ING came out with their, like, prediction saying that the Fed is going to cut rates 6 times in 2024, and that's great. That could mean that, interest rates for mortgages will come down into the 6s. So the question is, it's like, will there be just this moment of basically, it's like catching a knife. It's like, who wants to catch a knife on the way down?
Yeah.
And that's the question I'm starting to have. It's like, once people see it dropping, are they just going to sit, pause, and just wait? And then sellers could be like, well, now I'm listing my house, the rates are here, but the hardest thing, and this is kind of why I think we're still going to appreciate a smaller clip, but the inventory is just so unreasonably low in all these different markets. There's just not housing. And that's really where the issue is for these home buyers who just have been getting just destroyed every time they come back into the market. It's like they say, if it drops a point, 5 million buyers in the United States will come back. And it's like, yeah, I mean, in a normal market, if we were just always at 6%, I think that maybe if the rates kept dropping, like, prices could just settle out. But we've just done some crazy artificial, maneuvers in the last 36 months that I just don't think anybody really knows what to do. And like you had said, a lot of this is just lag. Like, we really, really don't know. And, just looking at, like, where the mortgage-backed securities are, the 10-year yield, like, the rates really should be in the 6s right now, but they just, for some reason, they're not. And, so no crystal ball or anything like that, but, the best thing I just tell people is, like, look, does it make sense for you to buy now? Does it make sense for you to sell now? And what are the motivations? Because that ultimately is it. You cannot time the market. I would hate for a 10% reduction in, your sale price. So if you can get this now, like, don't wait for rates to potentially go down, because the Fed, oh my gosh, they pivoted so many times, or just their, communication to all of us, changes the market. So don't wait, like, figure it out. And especially if you're relocating out of state or something along those lines, like, get that under contract, work with some people, good, trusted people. And, it's just a problem solving business. And don't get worried about the money, because the money isn't everything. It's like, you need a good transaction. You've got your personal life going on the entire time. So there are a lot of different factors, and it's just so hard because you've seen such crazy appreciation in the last 24 months. And it's like, let's get back to it. This is a transaction between a buyer and a seller, and people just coming together and just, like, transferring, assets and wealth. So that's kind of like where I kind of land on it, because you can't time the market. when it comes down to it. But
No.
I don't think there'll be any type of crash. If there is, I'll be a buyer. I'd be excited. I mean, I would be excited and kind of sad at the same time. But, the idea is if there are these issues, like, you got to be prepared. And I'm sure you're thinking the same thing is like, if we see this type of, movement come, it's like, maybe we're going to pivot and turn into a holding company for 5 years or something along this line.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
a whole nother rabbit hole with multifamily and
yeah,
bridge loans and debt coming due and all that. So
yeah.
hopefully we can build this thing up and then be back into multifamily by then, so we can take over some people's problems.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, Jake, thanks for coming on, man. This was really great talking to a wholesaler, kind of how they built their business from, college dorm room all the way up to now. Just you and Isaiah just owning it and, looking toward the future of just building equity in multifamilies. I mean, it's really cool to see. And the fact that it could be done virtually too. I mean, that's another way you can make money, just on calls like this or, just dialing, talking to homeowners.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Always good to come on and kind of share, learn a little bit more about kind of what you're doing as well. But anytime I can get on here and share my message and what I do, hopefully provide some value to some other people is always something I appreciate from you giving me the platform.
Awesome. Great. Well, thanks for coming on the show, Jake.